HiFiMan make some of the best headphones on the market, but they have a big problem. Their headphones keep getting outdone by competing models. Unlike most companies though, HiFiMan seem pretty okay with each of their headphones consistently being outdone. I suppose there's a good reason why HiFiMan aren't worried. You might be thinking that it's because they make so much profit on each individual model that they do sell, or maybe that it's about the volume of products they sell. I don't have any of that sort of financial information, but I also don't need it to know what's going on. The latest HiFiMan headphone to fall is the Arya. Its conqueror? The HiFiMan Arya. Yep, HiFiMan are fine with all of this because they keep beating themselves. The Arya Unveiled is another example of this. The Arya Organic was already great. The Arya Unveiled is exceptional. It's not perfect though. First off, new models mean new prices. After getting used to the Aryas being very affordable because of the various price drops, I was a bit shocked to see the Arya Unveiled coming in at $1,449 US. That's actually about where all of the Aryas have begun their life though, so it's not out of the ordinary. We've just all become a bit conditioned to HiFiMan headphones being sold at deep discounts. And then there's the new design. Some of you will be fine with these cheap plastic covers that you have to remove before each listening session, and you might also be fine with the increased risk to the drivers themselves. The new unveiled designs remove any kind of protection from the backside of the drivers. And that's great for the sound. It's also great for small metallic objects that might want to fly into the magnetic field of the drivers and straight through the thinner than paper diaphragms. You would have to be pretty unlucky for that to happen, but luck is luck. Let's talk about sound though, because you're only watching this if you're looking for a great sounding pair of headphones. The Arya Unveiled are a 27 ohm, 94 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity planar magnetic headphone. What that means is that you'll get a dangerous 110 decibels of volume out of these with just 40 milliwatts of power. So they're very easy to drive from a power point of view, but you will want to give them a high quality source to get the most out of them. In other words, don't expect these to sound their best from a cheap basic dongle, even though that dongle will have enough power. Sonically, these mark a fairly obvious departure from the type of sound that we're used to from other HiFiMan headphones. It's not a massive departure, but it's at least a detour. They're noticeably less treble emphasized than previous HiFiMan models. And that's especially true if we consider the trend in the treble tuning of the various Aryas over the last few generations. The Arya Unveiled has gone in the opposite direction than what the Arya Organic did when it superseded the Arya Stealth. The tuning on paper though is quite interesting, and it starts to tell the story of the Unveiled design. If you look at the measurements of the Arya Unveiled, they've got less bass than the Arya Organic. That might make you think that they're a brighter headphone, but they also have less treble. Doesn't that cancel out and make them the same then? Kind of, but here's the thing. The removal of the back grills and perhaps some changes to the rest of the driver design mean that the sound delivered by the Arya Unveiled is overall a smoother character of sound. So I'm not talking about frequency response as much now as the general character of what you hear. The Arya Unveiled has a sense of refinement that the previous Aryas didn't have. These are a wonderfully grown-up sounding headphone. They don't try to impress with bright treble or ear-bleeding levels of sharpness. Instead, they deliver a smooth, rich, and enveloping sound. It's still plenty detailed and resolving though, easily as good and probably better than any of the previous Aryas. Comparing the Arya Organic and the Arya Unveiled, the hi-hat and snare are just a little bit too much for me from the Arya Organic on Everybody Loves the Sunshine. The Unveiled, on the other hand, offers a more balanced treble experience. It also delivers more sense of separation and space in the sound. These are clearly sibling headphones, They're related, in other words, but the Unveiled is improved in pretty much every way that I can think of, and especially in tonal balance. The Organic pushes the sound forward more and is more energetic and even a little bit aggressive with its treble presentation in comparison. Some might perceive the sound from the Organics as being more detailed, but how I hear it is that they've really just turned up the clarity dial, and that can get a bit old after a while. By dialing back the treble a bit, the Arya Unveiled allows you to hear more into the music. And so as you relax into their sound, you'll probably hear more details there than you can hear on the more upfront version in the Arya Organic. If you compare the two headphones and focus your attention on the bass frequencies, you'll notice that the Arya Organic does have a fuller sounding bass. The Unveiled is a little bit less weighty, a little tiny bit less solid, but I don't miss it. Thanks to the reduced treble from the Arya Unveiled, they maintain an excellent tonal balance, and to me, that's actually more important. Depending on the source chain being used, I would subjectively like just a little bit more bass from the Arya Unveiled, but it's not lacking bass as such, and the extension of that bass is excellent. And so that's all well and good to compare the Arya Unveiled to the previous Arya Organic, the older model, but what about the real competition? Because after all, the Arya Organic is so much cheaper now. The more expensive Arya Unveiled is actually closer in price to the HiFiMan HE1000 SE. And the Arya Unveiled simply can't keep up with the technical performance of the HE1000 SE. Tonally, the Arya Unveiled might be preferable to some people over the slightly brighter sounding HE1000 SE, and that's because the Arya Unveiled is a slightly more relaxed listen, but at the same time it's also a little bit less resolving. It comes across as being not quite as technically capable. The soundstage from the Arya Unveiled is not quite as big as the SE, or at least the separation of sounds within that soundstage is a bit reduced from the Unveiled. And so if you have the budget for the HE1000 SE and you're tossing up between the Arya Unveiled and the SE, I would still recommend going for the HE1000 SE, unless you specifically need or want a smoother sound signature. In other words, if you have a bright source chain or you're particularly treble sensitive, that's where the Arya Unveiled is going to be the better choice. But in all other situations, I would head towards the HE1000 SE. And then of course, if you've got even more money to spend, you might start wondering about the new version of the HE1000, which is also an Unveiled, the HE1000 Unveiled. I'm going to keep that one for the next video, so be sure to subscribe because I've got lots to tell you about the HE1000 Unveiled and lots of comparisons just like the ones here. And speaking of comparisons, let's now look beyond the HiFiMan stable to see what else you might look at if you're considering the Arya Unveiled. The Meze Audio 109 Pro still represents some strong competition for the Arya Unveiled, despite costing about half as much. The 109s can be a little bit too bright in the treble when you compare them side by side with the Unveiled, and I get why some people aren't a fan of the treble on the 109s. If you're not, the Unveiled's going to be better. One positive side effect of the tuning of the 109s though, is that their sense of feel and articulation is next level, and it's clearly better than the Unveileds. The Unveileds though deliver more texture and detail in the bass compared to the 109s, but the punch down low and the articulation up high isn't as strong from the Unveileds. Once again, I'd say that the new tuning in the Aryas gives them the win in overall tonal balance. They're going to be very hard to beat in that area because they're an astoundingly well-tuned headphone now, in my opinion. And so in comparison, the 109s come across as a slightly less refined tuning of the sound, but they are still a lot of fun and they deliver an excellent sense of energy and excitement in the music. And so I think the way that I would break it all down is that I would choose the 109 Pros over the Arya Organics. You thought I was going to say the Unveileds, didn't you? But I would choose the Arya Unveileds over the 109s. Of course, that does mean you're spending significantly more money, but that's what you're here to find out about. And now, just before we wrap up all the comparisons with one more juicy one, you might have noticed that I swapped the cable I was using on the Arya Unveiled when I was doing the comparisons. The Arya Unveiled comes with a 6.3mm terminated cable. I've got no issues with that, but it's not the most comfortable cable. It's a little bit stiff. And so it's not a bad cable, but I prefer a much softer cable like the Atos Flow cable that I used for all my comparisons. I also find that the pure copper Litz design of the Atos Flow cable brings a greater sense of coherency to the sound with the Arya Unveiled compared to the stock cable. And so if anything, I was giving the Aryas a slight edge when I was doing these comparisons. But of course I used the same Atos Flow cable for comparisons between the Arya Unveiled, the Arya Organic, and the HE1000 SE. It was only when I got to the 109 Pros that I started using their own cable up against the Flow cable with the Aryas. And now, speaking of the Meze 109s, let's finish off the comparisons with another Meze Audio product in the new Meze Audio Poet headphones. We've now got two brand new models here, and the Poets are about $500 more again than what you'd be spending on the Arya Unveiled. For that $500 US extra, you're getting a nicer looking and feeling headphone that seems like it's much better put together, and it comes with a nicer quality stock cable. Sound-wise, things aren't quite as clear-cut perhaps. Nah, who am I kidding? The Poets are an easy win for me. Some might like the brighter and crisper sound of the Arya Unveiled when compared to the Poet. Remember, we're talking relatively here. But what really held them back for me was the soundstage. There's a touch more width from the Arya Unveiled soundstage, but the soundstage on the Poets goes way deeper and has more layering. I was also able to hear more of the room from the Poets. More ambience, if you like. The Poet brought the music to life for me in ways that the Arya Unveiled, although it's an excellent headphone, just couldn't quite do. If your budget stops at $1,500 US, don't think that any of this is suggesting that the Arya Unveiled isn't an amazing headphone. It absolutely is. Both of these, being the Arya Unveiled and the Meze Audio Poet, are absolutely wonderful headphones, and I would gladly own either as my one and only. It's also important to remember that if you prefer a brighter, crisper sound, you're going to want the Arya Unveiled. It's not as bright and crisp as some of the older HiFiMan headphones, but it's still a clean and crisp sounding headphone. It just balances that sense of crispness and clarity with some richness and smoothness in a better way than any other HiFiMan headphone to date, in my opinion. And so if that sounds good to you and you're leaning towards the Arya Unveiled, you're making a great choice. And you can use the links in the description down below if it does sound good to you. Alternatively, if you do have more money to spend and you think that maybe the Poet sounds like more your cup of tea, then I can tell you up here in this video why I think the Poet could be the very best headphone in Meze Audio's lineup right now. So watch that one next. For now, thank you to YouTube channel members, thank you to channel Patreon members, and thank you to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.